I am Madison Timmons.
I'm Soucy.
And we're paranormal specialists who live in the most haunted city on earth, Savannah, Georgia. Every day is Halloween in our line of work, so join us as we spin true tales of haunts, murders, and disturbing Savannah history. I'm Madison.
I'm Chris.
And welcome to the most haunted city on earth. Hey y'all. We are helping support Team Jameson in the 2024 Breakthrough T1D Low Country Walk. He's the son of our Parajunkie fan base manager. Breakthrough T1D, formerly known as the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, is a leading global type 1 diabetes research and advocacy organization. T1D is an autoimmune disease that is a lifelong condition that requires constant management and monitoring. The walk is November 10th in Charleston, South Carolina, and Team Jameson has a goal of raising $4,300. The last time Team Jameson walked, they raised $4,200, so they know with the support of our Parajunkies, we can beat that goal. The link is in the description of this episode. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of The Most Haunted City on Earth. My name is Madison Timmons.
I'm Soucy.
And today we are joined by three lovely members of the what is formerly, I guess, known as the Hagland case. You might have remembered it when we had Ryan Dunn on the show, and he had talked about his experience with the case. But today we have Kristin, Stacie, and Lindsay with us, and they are going to be telling us their side of their story. So thank y'all so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we're going to go ahead and just literally jump right on into it. So I guess the first part of the timeline is how did y'all meet and how did you get to Savannah?
So actually, Kristin and I met back in 2012. We had a class together. And I generally, every time I talk about how we met, I made a stupid joke in class and no one laughed except for her. And so I was like, that's going to be my best friend right there.
That is how friendships are made.
A year later, we met Stacie. Kristin and Stacie actually had a class together, and Kristin didn't like Stacie because she was too quiet.
Oh, no.
And then
she was judgy,
okay? And then the next quarter, all three of us had a class together. I was like, no, she's just quiet, Kristin. She's great.
And Stacie's also uber talented. Like, Stacie is incredibly talented, and it was a 2D drawing class. So, you know, being quiet and just being amazing in the class, everyone hated her. So we had another class with her. It was another 2D drawing class. I was like, oh, that girl. And Lindsay was like, no, she's just quiet. I was like, okay, I'll give her a chance.
Fair enough.
Yeah. And then we actually went to Hong Kong together and did a quarter over there in college. And that's how we actually started living together.
Oh, nice.
And then when we came back to the States, we were very much on a very tight turnaround of finding a new house to live in for before the next quarter started. And that's actually how we landed in the house. So we moved in December of 2013, and we moved out in May of 2015. So about a year and a half, we lived in the house.
Interesting. Okay. And where in Savannah, like you don't have to give the address, but where in Savannah in general, where was the house?
In Savannah proper. Okay. We were in downtown Old Savannah.
Wow. Okay. Interesting.
Originally, we were in the Red District.
Okay.
I'm trying to think of the Laurel Grove Cemetery. We were by there.
Right.
Yeah.
Very close to where we are right now. So that's
just in our backyard.
So that's comforting.
I think that was one of the questions that they even asked, like during the initial investigation and stuff, was about Laurel Grove Cemetery and stuff like that, because we were so near it.
Sure.
So when did you guys start to notice things? Was it like immediately off the jump or?
No. We lived in that house for a year before anything happened. And it wasn't until February, and very specifically actually near Stacie's birthday, that we ended up losing power. And almost immediately, excuse my French, shit hit the fan, literally. So it was February of 2015. We lost power, and we were all, and it's typical art students. You can hear it throughout the house. The power goes off, and you just say, "Oh my God, did I save anything?" And that's all you hear throughout the house.
All of us yelling.
Oh yeah, gonna save my projects.
Yeah. Exactly. And we ended up actually collectively sitting in my room waiting for the power to come back on. And Stacie, I want to say that you were trying to show us something on your laptop.
Yeah, I was like, oh yeah, my laptop's charged. We can watch like a movie or something on it. And that's when we're like, before that though, we had went outside to see how far like the power was out and stuff. Yeah. But it was only like our street and maybe the street next to us. And our neighbors were also outside. Sorry. Yeah. And so we had talked to them and they were like, yeah, it looks like it's just our block. Mm-hmm. And then we had gone back inside. But while that was happening, I guess we left the door open. We didn't think about it. And we were out on the street talking. So that was our first thought, was like when we went back inside and Stacie went to go get her laptop, and she collects Funko Pops, a lot of us, I do too. Lindsay does as well. And Stacie goes into her room and she goes, holy shit, runs back in, and we go with her, and all of her Funko Pops are like turned around. Yeah, like facing the wall.
Oh.
Yeah. Then we like run back to her room, and I like call my mom immediately, which I should have I was like, I think someone might have gotten the house when we were outside, but I was like, that's a really weird thing for someone just to do that breaks into your house.
Well, then we went to Kristin's room, and all the candles that were lit.
Oh, yeah.
All over they were not in the same location that they were on the floor.
Yeah, around your bed.
And there was one in the middle of the bed. So
it was weird.
It was very odd.
Well, that would be
so incredibly strange. And it's so very again, if you were to make a horror movie, that's it. That's how you do it. Because that's such a turn on it. And the interesting thing is a power outage in the middle of winter. There's a notion and a belief that if there are supernatural entities in the area, they can feed off of different power sources. And a lot of people believe that electricity is something that, and you hear it in all the ghost hunting shows, the battery, I just charged this battery and now it's dead. The idea is that the spirits can consume electricity. And if you're in the middle of winter where there's no ambient heat to pull out of the air and you turn the electricity off, then the only thing left is humans, us. We become the source of energy for supernatural, presences. So it's an interesting thing, because it is like, that's such a very significant thing to be able to say, I think it was this moment. And then when you go back and you listen to a lot of people's ghost stories involve things like, a lot of people believe that the reason the theaters are so haunted is because of the high powered lights. There's all this electricity, easy consumption for spirits. But when they don't have it, they come for you. And I always tell people, if you're going to go ghost hunting, go in the winter, because the ghosts are more likely to interact with you, trying to get more energy than, because during the heat they can pull it right out. That's the cold spot. Oh, there's a cold spot here. You feel this cold spot? It's because it's drawing it right out of the air. So it's fascinating to be like, oh, that was a quick turnaround. Almost making you wonder if the blackout itself wasn't the cause of some kind of disruption. Maybe a neighbor's house or a neighboring entity. Overfed and then immediately went looking for its next meal.
Well, for years, I know that all of us had we had full blown panic attacks anytime the power went out. It took a very long, I don't know, until I moved into my current house 4 years ago. I still would literally sit in the corner and shake. I could not, because not even at this time, in the story, this to us, we thought somebody was in the house, so back to the story. My ADHD brain, it goes everywhere. I'm sorry. We all have ADHD. So
that's kind of okay.
No, you're on the ADHD show. Yeah, you're good. Don't worry about it.
But yeah, no. So we had seen that we went back into Lindsay's room. We shut the door, and we were kind of just well, we
we were outside. It's not the best area, right? It's also not horrendous, but it's not the best area. And we had just sat there kind of going, okay, do we call the police? It's a silly thing to tell the police. We weren't sure kind of what to do. So I had like this USB rechargeable light, like Panda thing, and I was holding it. Lindsay grabbed a bat and we just walked through the house and we checked everywhere there possibly could be somebody hiding. It was a 1-story house, and the way the bedrooms were was Lindsay's bedroom, my bedroom, and then Stacie's. So on the same side of the house. So, we were like, it's pretty small. So, and we found nothing and shut the door, and that was about it for the night.
Yeah. Basically, when we realized that nobody's in the house, I was trying to put my boots on and leave. And Kristin was like, where are you going?
We have work to do. When this power comes on.
No, that is the correct response. Yeah. Very good.
Yes. But
Lindsay was the first to want to leave at any point in time.
I was literally putting my boots and jacket on. I was like, I will survive.
I make it to the credits.
Exactly.
Right. But once we talked everybody out from their ledge, mostly me, nothing really happened. And then that weekend, actually, Stacie's family was coming down and Kristin's family was actually headed to Disney World. So they stopped by while going to Florida. So everybody's parents except for mine were in town. And since it was Stacie's birthday weekend, she went out to dinner with her parents. And I actually tagged along with Kristin's parents to go out with them. And we decided for some odd reason, for one reason or another, we were going to come back to the house with Kristin's family and just kind of chill out and talk out of what, for whatever reason. And Kristin and I actually made it back to the house first prior to them. And we were walking in and we were telling jokes and we were laughing and we're passing by Kristin's room because my room is actually at the back of the house. Kristin's room is in the middle. And Kristin opens her door and she has this giant, and she gasping, and I turn around, I'm like, what's going on? And I look into her room, I'm like, I don't see anything. And I look up, and on top of the ceiling fan is this rectangular object, and the ceiling fan is just spinning. But the ceiling fan isn't on.
Oh.
And Kristin's like, what is it? I'm like, I don't know. So I go up on her bed and I take it down, and it's actually the mirror that was on her wall behind us.
And I go, don't aim it at me, because if I see anything in that mirror, I'm out of this house. I'm done. I will never come back.
And so I was like, how did that happen? And Kristin's like, I don't know. I'm like, well, I don't know because no one's been in the house. And then while all of this is going on, her family shows up. Her parents walk in. They're like, what's going on? We explain it to them. And then Stacie comes back with her parents, and her parents are actually staying at the house with us. Mm-hmm. And so we're all kind of a little on edge at this point because now the activity hasn't stopped. And everybody leaves except for Stacie's parents. And actually that night, her mom gets up in the middle of the night and she can't sleep for whatever reason. And she looks off to the side, and we had this box of Coke cans, and there was one Coke outside the box, and it just tips over and then pushes off the edge of the table.
Just like rolls off.
Yeah, just rolls off. So we're like,
jeez.
This is such an insane amount of kinetic
Right.
experiences. The fact that you have objects moving so quickly too, because oftentimes you build up to an object moving. You have like eerie moments and strange silences and, scritchies and little sounds. And then an object seems out of place. You started with like a bunch of Funko Pops facing the wrong direction, mirrors on top of blades.
And not just like one or two Funko Pops, like a collection of them.
Yeah, that's so fascinating.
Of like 30 of them, and every single one was flipped.
Yeah.
Because I'm always telling people, spirits don't have physical bodies. There's no muscles, no bones, nothing. So whatever they're doing entirely with energy. As I try to imagine moving something just with your brain, and that's what's happening. They're moving it with something that doesn't exist, and it's like, oh, that's a powerful entity. I mean, and a spirit that would touch a mirror is nightmarish, actually.
No, seriously.
Because most spirits avoid mirrors. There's a common belief that a spirit could get lost in a mirror. So blah, I say.
Yeah.
This one's definitely not afraid of mirrors.
No.
Well, no, I'll get to that later. There is, there are stages of the storytelling in which it's like there is a brand of spirit that is very, very comfortable with mirrors and oftentimes use mirrors to truly horrify people.
Yeah.
But in this, like, as you're telling it, if you were to come to me with just these stories, we would thinking poltergeist-like activity, and simple spirits that are asserting themselves very aggressively, because that's kind of, it's funny because a lot of people don't talk about the stages of like a possession or a demon presence in a home. That there are 4 stages, and the first stage is infestation, and the infestation looks like a haunting. It's just objects moving, strange sensations, making you uneasy. And the whole purpose of that is to lower your resolve, to take away your ability to logic your way out or to fight with anything other than panic, or it's wearing you down. So in that first stage, in the infestation stage, it's making you question the reality you live in. So I'm sorry.
Fair,
Continue
me and Lindsay, we're also very big skeptics. Stacey's a little more open to stuff, but we're
not really not really religious or anything. No,
but it's very I was adamantly like, there's got to be some explanation. Like I was convinced someone was coming in our house. I was convinced because they had told us when we moved in, like there had been squatters there before. I was like, there's got to be some way. You see that video of that little old lady living in a cabin? There's somebody in our house. And we're making jokes about it because we cope with humor. And we're like, there's something here. Like there's someone here messing with us. Like somebody's doing this. And that was, until you guys went away for the week, that was pretty much our response to it. We're making jokes and stuff.
Yeah.
But
because there was you didn't feel a threat within the house.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like there was that bad energy wasn't there. Like you can still walk in and be cheerful and happy and happy-go-lucky at the beginning. It wasn't until the end that you can really feel it gaining momentum and gaining more and more energy. That's just like it sucked the joy out of you. Like you couldn't be happy in this house. You physically couldn't do it.
Right.
Wow.
So we ended up we had one more week, and during that week. Now, we found out later on that what happened in my room, noise-wise, did not happen in the rest of the house. So what Kristin and Stacie would hear is not necessarily what I would hear.
Oh,
and comes
really
to find out, my room, we didn't know it at the time, was a void. I was not hearing anything. So they would talk about like, oh, did you hear the walking? I'm like, no, the house is settling. They're like, no, someone's walking in the attic. The attic is not big enough for anyone to walk into. It's a little crevice. Barely you could call it an attic. And I'm like, no, I'm like, I hear a house settling, but I'm not hearing walking. And that happened throughout the week prior to Stacie and I leaving to go home for a week. And during that week, I actually needed, and we're gearing up to graduation. So all of us have our gowns with us in the house. So during the week while I'm at home, I actually needed some measurements. So I call up Chris and I'm like, do you mind going into my room, getting those measurements and, texting them to me? She's like, yeah, sure. No problem. She calls me back an hour later and she's like, you freak. And I was like, what? It's like, do you know how scared I was walking into your bedroom? I was like, for what? She's like, your cap and gown is on the ceiling fan. I said, no, it's not.
And it was directly in the center of the room. It looked like someone was standing there when I walked in. I was not okay with her.
I was like, Kristin, no, it's not. It's in my closet because who puts a cap and gown on a ceiling fan? She's like, it's hanging on your ceiling fan, Lindsay. I don't know what to tell you. I was like, well, could you take it down? Because I don't want to get dusty, please. And she was like, I don't know. If you're not the one who put it up there, I don't want to go back in there.
God.
Good move.
And now I'm alone. Yeah, I'm alone for a couple of days. I'm like, I'm just going to lock myself in my room and not leave because now I'm terrified.
Right.
Yeah.
You are all passing the horror movie test. You're all doing a good job. I'm very proud of you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But that night she calls me up and she was like, there's someone in Stacie's room. And I was like, well, call 911. And she was like, no. She's like, she's like, Lindsay, I don't think anyone's in the house, but someone is in Stacie's room. And I was like, well, what makes you think that? And she was like, well, there's humming. And it's really loud. It's really loud humming. And she puts her phone next to the wall that they share. So one side is Stacie's room, the other one is Kristin's. And she's like, can you hear? And I'm like, honestly, no, I can't. But can you call me, take a recording of it, send it to me, and then call me back? And she did. And on the recording, you can clearly hear a woman just humming her little heart out. And that, I was like, oh my God, I think you need to get out of the house. And then Kristin's called me back. She's like, can you hear it? I'm like, yeah, I can hear it. She's like, I tried to go up to the door, and you touched the doorknob or something like that, Kristin. It was cold.
No, I didn't. So I didn't go at the time.
Okay.
I heard something. Immediately, I turned every light on that I could reach, and I thought it was from outside. So I was like, I don't like what's going on. So I turned all the lights on, and I went by Stacie's door, and I'm like, oh no, that's Stacie's room. And I ran back to my bedroom, and I shut the door, and I moved. I have this little it was like a printer tray next to and I put it in front of my door. And I'm like, this is gonna help me against the ghost, because yeah. And I'm like freaked out. I'm calling, like, there's somebody in there. There's somebody in there. I'm crying. Oh no. There's the phone call, and there's recording. I'm sobbing on the phone calls going, I don't know what to do. I'm hyperventilating. I'm panicking. I'm like, it's so loud. It's so loud. And I'm like, I thought it was coming from outside at first. So somebody's having a party and someone was singing. And it was just humming, and no song I knew, nothing, just humming. And so this was maybe the first hour of the humming. And I was on the phone with Lindsay almost the whole time. And I was like, all right, I mean, I don't know what to do. I'm going to call my brother who lives on the other side of town. He lived by Forsyth Park. And so he's at a party drinking. And he's like, I'm going to ride my bicycle over with my friends. I'm like,
my
savior.
Right.
Yeah. I was like, okay. So he's like, but it'll be an hour and a half. I was like, okay. So I'm basically just sitting there. I had called my parents. I'm like, can you guys hear this? I don't want to be alone. And I think I ended up talking to my mom on the phone for, I don't know, a couple of hours while I waited for him. And it just got progressively louder and louder and louder. And then, so my brother shows up, and I hang up the phone. I'm like, hey, he's here. So he's like, I'm not coming to the door. I'm like, what? It's like, I hear it from out here. I'm like, yeah, because her door is right next to the door. Her bedroom is right next to the front door. And he's like, okay, you need to come open the front door for me. And he's like, I'll come in. I was like, okay. And I open my door, and all the lights are out. And I'm like, no, I specifically turned on every single light in this house. I'm not leaving. Can you open her window or something? No. And he's like, no. I'm like, all right. I was like, but you better be at that door. So I ran as fast as I could to the front door, threw it open, and walked out on the porch. And I was like, I don't want to go in. So he's like, no. And remember, he's a little bit drunk. And he's like, no. We'll go in. This is my friend. He's really religious.
Perfect.
I'm like, yes, all right, person I've never met, and hi. So we go inside, and now the singing's extremely loud, and they put their hand on the door, and it's really cold, and they're like, it's so weird, it's freezing, and they go to open the door, and the singing immediately stops. Immediately stops. Singing stops. We're all standing there just going and he opens the door, and Stacie's room is destroyed. Everything's everywhere. I had heard no noise aside from the singing, but all of a sudden we hear thumping, and then the whole room is messed up. And we're just sitting there staring, and we're like, okay. So his friend grabs one of Stacie's candles, lights it, and he goes, no, you gotta confront it. And I'm on, we need to get out. But he's like, no. He's like, religious. Yeah, I'm going to say a prayer. It's going to be okay. And I was like, okay. And they just start my brother just starts wandering around the room, picking stuff up. And I'm like, can we clean this up? Yeah. So we're trying to like clean up her room. And I'm like, I don't want to be in here. And he says like a little prayer or whatever. And then that was it. And they ended up staying the night, or my brother did, and his friend left on the bike. And my brother ended up staying the night and sleeping on the couch. And I slept on the other couch, and we watched movies and had all the lights on, and it was okay. And nothing else happened that night. But when we woke up in the morning, there was our dining room table was like behind the couches, and one of the chairs was pulled up right next to where my brother's head had been.
Oh God.
And was like right on the side of the couch, which was like a weird position for it to be in. It was one of the back like chairs too. So that was the only thing I was like, did you move the chair? And he's like, no. No. Cool. Looks like somebody was like watching the movie with us. It was weird.
Or watching your brother really close.
Or something. I don't. Yeah.
And these are heavy chairs too, because they're actually, I still have the chairs. They're made out of oak. So these are not light chairs by any means for it to just pick up and move.
Right.
But yeah, that was that day. And then he ended up leaving, and he wouldn't come back.
Understandably.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. But that unfortunately it's not the end of what happened that weekend. So I got really freaked out. At this point, I was not comfortable being in that house, but really didn't have anywhere to go. Everyone was out of town. So I went, and I literally, anytime I left the bedroom, I would be on a video call with Lindsay or Stacie, because I was so scared. I don't know. I was pretty convinced that I was like dead. Whatever was there was going to come for me. And I was like, but nothing had gone into my room or touched anything in my room. So I felt safe in there. But the next day, I'm trying to remember, I was on the phone with Lindsay. I was going to the kitchen to get a drink or something.
No, the back door, because Riley, her dog, going something with Riley. And so she was on the phone with me. So the camera was facing out. So I was not looking at Kristin. And we were rounding the corner, and I saw my bedroom just, out of the corner of my eye, and my door was closed. And she was like, look at what Riley can do. And she showed me a trick that, whatever the trick was, I think it was like sit on command at that point. And I was like, oh, what a good boy. And, she turns the camera back around. So now I'm facing her, and she's going back to her room. So she's going down the hallway, and she turns the corner, and I see behind her that my door is now wide open. And I see that because when you open my door, right there is my bed. And then there's the rest of the room, because I actually have the master. And I was like, my door is open and my bed is completely moved. And she was like, what do you mean? And she looks behind her, sees that what I said was true, hauls ass to her room, closes the door. And she was like, Lindsay, I swear to God, that door was not open. I was like, I know it wasn't open because I remember clocking it, especially after you told me everything that happened at Stacie's room. So now I feel a little bit more protective of my room because I don't want someone going in there, but too late, someone did. And so I was like, do you mind coming out? And I'll be on the phone with you the whole time. Not the fact that I could actually do anything, but do you mind going into my room? Because I really would like to see what happened. And that took some convincing. that took a good 20 minutes.
I was already pretty freaked out at that point. There was,
yeah.
And so Kristin, being the hero, walked into my room, and she showed me everything. And this thing, I mean, like, we thought that it was pissed at Stacie. It apparently had a big old grudge for me. My bed was completely just destroyed. It was moved. The headboard was moved. Blankets that were on my bed is now across the way. My graduation gown is back on the ceiling fan. The dresser was pushed to the side. And the clothes were just out and spewed everywhere. It was just completely messed up. And I was like, oh, I guess I should stop making fun of it.
Oh God.
Maybe that'll save me. But I was like,
she made me go into the room because I'll never forget. She made me go into the room.
I'm sorry.
Because her really expensive Cintiq had something over it, like was hanging over it. And she's like, you need to make sure my synth's working. And I'm like,
oh, sure. Yeah.
I don't want to be here.
It's like, I would like to leave.
Ghosts be damned. Make sure the equipment's still running.
Yeah. So I like ripped the thing off and I was like, it looks fine. I'm out. And I ran to my room. But all night, after that, I heard thumping and walking through the hallways. And now my bedroom's in the middle, and then there's the bathroom here, but then Lindsay's bathroom is on the wall next to me, right? So I hear somebody walking down the hallway, like hitting the wall. I hear like hitting the wall through Lindsay's room, and then I hear it right next to my head where my bed was, in like her shower bathroom, hitting the wall right next to my head. And I'm sitting on the phone and I'm talking to Lindsay, and I think I talked to her until like midnight. She went to bed and I called my sister. My sister stayed up with me until like 8 a.m. or something like that, listening to it just go back and forth and just things slamming into the door, things slamming into the wall next to me. And I was like, I'm terrified. Like, I'm so scared. I don't want to be here. I don't know what to do.
Well, I told Kristin, I was like, the next day I'm gonna come down.
Yeah.
Because I don't think it'd be safe at this point, because it's clearly gearing up, like it's going back to back, and I'm afraid that you're number 3. So I'll come down the next day, and at that point, her dad was very near Savannah, so he stopped by, and he came over very late during the night, and stayed over. And so actually while I was driving down the next morning, because I got up very early, I packed my bags. I was like, I'll be there in a minute. Her dad went to go take a shower. He opened the curtain to the shower, and on the wall, on the mist of the mirror, there was a message written clearly to him, because it's the mirror facing the bathroom, the shower. And in the steam, it says, "They are mine."
Oof. Oof.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Nope.
And Kristin she called me. I was 2 hours out, maybe. I was halfway through the drive. And she called me. She's like, yeah, my dad just had that message written to him in the bathroom. And at that point, I really wanted to stop. And like, I started shaking. I was like, I don't think any of us need to be in this house anymore. Problem is, we have one quarter left and we have nowhere to go.
And it's our last quarter of our senior year, and we're animation students. So we've been working on our film all year. So this is like, we're trying to finish our senior films at this time too. So we're spending all hours in the dorm buildings and then coming back to this. And it was a nightmare.
Yeah. And that's the one question that people always ask us is like, well, why didn't you just leave? That was a luxury that we did not have.
Right.
There was no to go. So...
A month left of school, 2 months left of school. We're gonna find another apartment. Like it wasn't gonna happen.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Especially in the middle of the school year where all the students are already here and they all have the apartments. So, so we actually at that time we had Ryan and Kim geared up, and they asked the questions and we answered them to the best of the ability. I have to say, I do have to clarify something that Ryan did say on your podcast. There at no point there a Ouija board in this house. I really want to
mess with something, and we were like, no. We literally didn't do anything. The power went out, and then we were home. That was it. There was nothing. We didn't mess with anything. We didn't listen. We were like, it was our senior year. We were antisocial, and we had so much to do that we weren't going out and partying. And we're
not hanging out with living people. We're not going to hang out with dead people.
Exactly.
Yeah, like we're just trying to do our best to survive the quarter.
Yeah, that does sound very, very, very against everything you've told us about your approach to all of this. So yeah, duly noted. And it's interesting because upon the mirror conversation, upon scrying in the mirror a message, you've now gone to the second stage of a demonic presence, which is oppression. The oppression stage is where it is actively trying to put you in the emotional state of oppression, trying to rob you of comfort, make sure that you don't have any resources to pull from, making sure that your desperation is at its paramount. There's a famous case, the Moffat family in California, and they had a demon that wreaked havoc with them for almost a decade. They called it Mr. Entity. But his only means of communicating was by writing on a mirror. And through those communications were they able to find out. And there's nothing worse in these kinds of situations than to hear an entity decry ownership, to suggest you're mine, they're mine, because it suggests that enough activity has happened to allow this entity access and entrance. So it's a harrowing story, and it is in so many ways it's kind of textbook. But the beauty of it is in your telling, it is very natural progression. There's no sensationalism to it. It's very incredibly like, oh yeah, this is it hit the ground running, yes, but it's fulfilling everything that you would think, from coming from the point of view of a person who spends a lot of time reading about her or having insight to it at all. It's like, oh, your story lines up. It is without a doubt what any assessor would start, and ask and question and want to know. So yeah, it's fascinating. I'm sorry. Please continue.
No, it's good, because honestly, when we watched Ryan's interview with you guys, we were like, I'm sorry, what do you mean demon possession? That never crossed our mind.
Right.
We knew we were dealing with an evil entity or a demon. We just didn't know to what extent. And until you guys started talking about it, and we're like, huh? Were we in that much danger?
And I should point out that we use the word demon a lot, and we don't necessarily mean it in a biblical or specific religion. It's just the easiest catch-all for the kind of phenomenon that you're dealing with. And we try not to endorse one system of belief over another in these instances, and it's just, well, this is the language we use. This is it's the easiest vocabulary when you're dealing with this kind of behavior, and because there are pre-described scenarios, it's like, oh, you know what, you are falling into these patterns that are recognized by people who study this, and it's like, oh, that's kind of textbook. You're going through a textbook escalation of negative energy forces, which most people do refer to as demonic. However, we find ourselves saying demon and not meaning, necessarily a specific named, horned-tailed creature in the corner, although not excluding it either.
Yeah. And I'm wondering if it may be just a thought of the reason why it showed up at the specific time it did is because y'all were going to be graduating
Yes,
soon.
Absolutely. The energy and the buildup of your soon graduation, that's a lot of impending expectation, a lot of potential energy, the potential energy of where you're going next. All of that building and budding is absolutely the kind of energy that a spirit would want to feed upon, because you're having such high elation and stress and all kinds of emotional stressors and things like that. It's a perfect recipe for being taken advantage of by parasitic, spiritual energies.
1,000%.
I think that was one of the things that Ryan and Kim, when they had come to the house, because they came to the house and they did their investigation, and they tried to help. Like, they gave us kind of herbs and salt to put on our windows and our doorways and stuff, and to help. But even when they were in the house, for some reason, now, it's an old house, or not an old house. I think it was only
2002.
It was 10, 15 years old at the time, but it was thin walls, there's a lot of houses close to each other. And, you could hear things from the neighbors, but when they were there, it was we were in a bubble of isolation. You could hear nothing. I think even all of us commented on, we're like, this is really like uncomfortable. This has been it just, you felt it, like you felt like the ringing in your ears of the silence and things like that. And it was very weird because we hadn't heard that. The part of, the thing was we heard noises all the time. And so that was kind of just something that was new, was just the dead silence when they came.
Yeah, that's kind of scary. That's suggesting that it knew to hide. It was literally holding its breath because the interesting thing about any spiritual entity is they're not smarter than us. They don't have more information than we do. And if you brought a new element in, the question is, well, can that element hurt me? Can that element harm me? Here are people who might have the ability to do something to me. So I'm just going to be quiet and hide. And when they're gone, I'll turn it up. It's like, I'll make up the difference and punish you for trying to bring someone in.
And that's how it felt like. 'Cause even during the investigation now, we did pick up things during the investigation. Pretty much everything that happened in the house that they could pick up, either sound-wise or at one point, we were all sitting in my room and there was this really strong sense of perfume, or like a, not a perfume, Kristin, what would you call it? Cologne, thank you. A cologne smell came very quickly and then left. But everything, and this is, everything that happened in the investigation always happened in my room. There's really not anything that happened anywhere else in the house. And so while we were sitting there, I was like, this is the only time truly that I felt very uncomfortable in my room, because it's just, there's now so much activity and now we're recording it. So I don't feel like a crazy person, and Kristin doesn't feel like a crazy person. And during this whole thing, we kept Stacie in the dark because we're
I had no idea any of this was happening at the moment. So
because we're
the
like
investigations. She knew that obviously she was there for the other stuff, but
just not that spring break week. That's
She came back. She was like, "Why is everything mismatched?" And we're like, "Well, Stacie."
I was like, "Why are my shelves on the floor?"
We didn't want her to freak out. Stacie would have freaked out originally. Well, we felt we were nervous. We were like, she's not going to come back. She's going to just quit school and stay up there. She's not coming back.
And that's a respectable decision, by the way.
Yes. But one of the things actually I think is interesting to point out, that Lindsay had woken up to somebody standing over her bed, a man.
Oh, no.
I'll let Lindsay tell that.
Please do.
So prior to Ryan and Kim and actually me leaving, I always got this feeling when I was asleep to wake up, like that internal instinct that something's staring at you. And so a lot of the times I would wake up and clearly there's a shadow man. Like there's no, like the shadows would look weird, and then there's an outline of a man. And like you can't see his eyes, but he's staring at you. So you feel it. And that happened quite a bit in my room. And then after the investigation happened, it started now when I would wake up, and it was always during the witching hour, always between 2 to 3 a.m. And I would wake up from a dead sleep, and then my whole room would be filled with orbs. And not like the orbs that you see on television. Like they're clearly orbs, but there'd be like electricity around them, like clearly souls. And every soul had a different color to them. And the whole time I'm like, I got to be still asleep, or I'm like that in between state where my consciousness has not left the sleep state yet. And so I would take my nails and be like, well, you can't hurt yourself in your sleep. And I would be like taking my nails into my arm. I'm like, I'm clearly awake and I am viewing what I'm viewing. And so that ramped up in my room a lot of the times. And then unbeknownst to me, Stacie and Kristin would be hearing things, like the whole house would be vibrating, and they would come into my room and be like, Lindsay, I know we don't live in the best of areas, and I know that you exercise in your room, but she
runs in place in the whole house. But she did this like since I've known her, so it was not like that abnormal.
Right? No. I'm a very anxious person, so I need to move sometimes to get that anxious energy out. And so that's what I would do. But a lot of the times when they walk in, be like, Lindsay, are you exercising? I'm like, I just got out of the shower. I'd be like in my bed with my book. I'm like, I've been here an hour.
Like the whole house is shaking. We hear you running. And she's like, no, not at all.
Yeah. And they're like, no, we hear it coming from your room. I'm like, I've been in my room the whole time and it's dead quiet.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
but I wanted to bring up the sleeping thing, Lindsay, because one of the scariest things that came out of that investigation was Lindsay asked.
I asked a question. Are you the one watching me? I don't say I'm asleep. All I ask is, are you the one watching me? And we hear a very clear response from a man going, while you're sleeping.
Oof. Yeah.
Oh, God.
No, thank you. No.
And I'm done. I'm out.
Bags packed on the way.
Yep.
There was a couple other responses, like there was like no's and yeses, and I think there was.
And was this through a spirit box, through a radio?
I think it was just through their recording, their audio.
Oh, they were doing an EVP session?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we were just asking questions and stuff. They asked about Laurel Grove Cemetery, and they said no specifically about that. And there was a couple other things, but I think that was the scariest one. Was the
while you're sleeping,
right. Response while you were sleeping, because it's a man's voice, and it's like specifically.
Mm-hmm.
And not a man's voice that I recognize.
Right.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
Not someone that I grew up with and they passed or anything like that. I did not recognize his voice whatsoever. And I was like, I'm good. I'd like to leave now, please.
Oof.
But yeah, after Ryan and Kim came, it was actually for about 2 weeks. I think nothing happened in the house. We stopped hearing the noises all the time. Like, it was very nice. We were like, oh, you know what? Maybe they maybe the salts and stuff and the herbs. Yeah, maybe we put stock into this. Maybe it helped. And then stuff started happening again. And
what we didn't realize is that little piece was it's taking a breath.
Yeah.
Geared up to the next point.
And there's a very common story that when you bring someone in to like bless the house or do things like that, a lot of times the spirits will believe that they are being bound. You know, basically you show up and you say, you know, if you bother us again, you know, your spirit will be, you know, yeeted. And their general response is that what's going to happen to us? And so they walk on eggshells for a little while. And over time, they're like, well, what if I just like poke? Oh, you know, nothing happened. No lightning, no anything. So what if I shake? And what I've seen before in cases where people have had kind of haphazard blessing ceremonies or, you know, do-it-yourself kind of stuff is it'll be quiet for a little while, but when it does come back, it comes back kind of like with a vengeance because the time that they lost is time that they're not feeding.
Yeah.
And now they're starving. And they're like, I have to do something.
And unfortunately, that's what happened with us. It took a step back, and now it came back, and it came back with a vengeance. And its poking and prodding point was literally moving these heavy chairs, like the chairs that had Kyle move. That one, at one point, Stacie came out.
They were all stacked on the table.
They were all stacked on the table.
Oof.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I walked out because my room's at the front of the house, and I was going to the bathroom. And as I passed by, I can see into the kitchen, and there was like a chair stacked on top of the middle of the table with everything that we had on there stacked underneath, like nice and neat. So I went into Kristin's room. I'm like, "Did you put it on there?" And she's like, "No." So then I walked to Lindsay. I was like, "Did you put it on there?" She's like, "No." She's like, "Just take it down and don't talk about it. Just ignore it."
We were trying not to acknowledge it at that point because we felt like it got worse when we acknowledged it.
Right.
Yes, and that's actually a fair assessment, but it's also, you know, it's a double-edged sword because it also invites them to try more drastic things.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. So there was so the noises started getting really bad again. Stacie had a friend come over at one point. Yeah. And she didn't tell him what was going on at the house. And he went home and he called her the next morning and was like, you know, it was really weird. I felt like there was somebody sitting on the bed next to me when I woke up this morning. And then I felt them get up. And Stacey's like, oh, well, there's something I have to tell you.
Funny you should mention.
Weird thing for you to mention to me. So
my sister had come and visited on their way down to Florida. And when she was packing, when she got home, she was unpacking, like one of the lamps like was thrown at her. Nothing had ever, we lived in this house, 30 years, and nothing had ever happened. So she was like flipping out. So we were starting to get really nervous, and we were like, stop Ryan, Kim, maybe we could get them to come back. And we talked to them, and they were like, hey, so we can't come back to your house.
Because whatever's in your house is now at our house.
Right. They had mentioned that.
Yeah. And they were like, and messing with our kids to the point where we can't come back. So we were like, oh, okay. So what do we do? We don't know what to do. So, things, they just started escalating, and they just, every night we would just hear running up and down the hallway, people talking in the living room. We would hear Lindsay yelling at them to shut up in the middle of the night. And Lindsay was like, I would never say anything. This is like, I never said that at all. And we just hear Lindsay, something mimicking Lindsay's voice to get us. We felt like it was to get us to come out there. I remember one night, me and Stacie, we shared a bathroom, and Lindsay had her own bathroom. So me and Stacie were sitting there brushing our teeth together. And I was like, I have to pee really bad. And she's like, you can pee here. I was like, no, I'm going to go in Lindsay's room. So I go to Lindsay's room. I open the door. I was like, hey, I just got to pee. She goes, I just saw a woman walk in there, so I wouldn't. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? And she goes, yeah, I just saw a woman. Yeah.
This was in the middle of the night, and this was a situation. Now, typically, again, either I saw the orbs or I saw the shadow people. It was one of the two. It was never anything else. This night, I have to say, I woke up very awake, and I looked immediately to my bathroom, and at the very top of my bathroom, there's a woman, and I could see her on the door jamb looking out.
Holy moly.
I mean, like fully, like how I'm looking at you right now, that's how clear she was.
Wow.
This was not I couldn't see through her. I couldn't do anything like that. The only thing that gave me pause was the fact that her eyes were completely black.
Nope. No, thank you. No.
But she was staring right at me.
We have a sound effect button.
Go for it.
Yeah, no, thank you. No.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I remember, and I woke up, and I know that she knew I was awake, and she did not run away. She didn't do anything. She and I stared at each other for maybe close to 15 seconds. I didn't move. I didn't sit up, but I did stare at her, and she stared right back. And she pushed off the door jamb and went back into the bathroom. And not even a second later, Kristin comes in, and she's like, I have to pee. She's halfway through the bathroom. I'm like, okay, but there's a lady in there.
Occupied. So, worth mentioning, this would be the third stage of demonic interaction, which is called obsession. Demonic obsession is when the spirits are so active that you can't really pay attention to anything else in your life, that you are now actively, consistently, and always aware of their presence and their machinations and their movings. You see them clearer. They have far more ability to disrupt your daily activity. And so, when an assessor is looking first at infestation, then oppression, by the time it gets to obsession is when you really start thinking of calling in the big guns, because oftentimes all of these could be usually handled through blessing activity, through bringing people in with cleansing rituals, with blessing rituals, with things like that. But beyond this point, you will need an exorcist. At that level, when and again, this is a very narrow field, and I'm only speaking from one point of view, and there are many points of view to take with this kind of thing. But like I said, because we have so much documentation about it, you are definitely describing each stage kind of perfectly, that you've gotten to a stage where your days are consumed by this activity that is pulling you from concentrating on any other faction of your life.
Well, and there was also like a very extreme isolation, because we felt were like, we can't tell anybody this. We like, people will think we're crazy. Nobody's going to believe us.
And that's the whole point of these activities, is to isolate you and make sure that you are alone and you don't turn for help or you don't reach out. It's supposed to cut you off from all the things that you support you and take advantage of you being alone.
Yeah. And I know at this point, because while I was having all the activity in my room, Stacie on a nightly basis would have this little demon child in her corner. Just looking at her.
It's just like a weird, every time I'd sleep, I would like feel like something or see a shadow thing in the top left corner of my ceiling. It was never like on the ground. It was always in the top left corner. But I would just roll over because it didn't feel threatening though. I don't know. That's the only thing I ever saw in that house. I never saw anything they saw ever until I left my house and went back home. And then I had seen the woman at my house, but that's like way later.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But
yeah. I think so at this point, it's just weeks of just like constant barraging with sound and everything like that. And then just the all night, just hearing things and people talking all night, just like gossiping about us is what it felt like. It was kind of weird. Wow. Like scratches on the walls. Like once you went to bed, you really didn't want to come out of your room. We'd stay late to work at the it's called Monty, which is our animation building. We were like, we don't want to go home. Like it was a lot. And
because at this point the energy in the house had changed because you couldn't walk in and you couldn't be happy anymore.
Right.
That's when it started feeling very like.
That's the obsession. I mean, the obsession. The obsession is you can't monitor your own emotions. You know, the spirit is now in charge of how you feel.
Yeah. Yep. We were at one point we were in the kitchen and we were having a conversation, and you can see basically besides the bedrooms, you can see the rest of the house from the kitchen. So you can see all the way to the back door. And we were having a conversation in the kitchen and we started laughing. We were gossiping about somebody. Someone had done something stupid or whatever. And there was a natural lull in the conversation, and you can hear behind us in the living room going, who are they talking about? And then you can hear a mumble like someone just answered. I'm like, oh, okay. And we're all like, okay, well, that's enough of that conversation. Back to the bedroom, back to the safe zone.
I was video chatting with Lindsay. I remember I was video chatting with her. I think you were in class or something. And we were talking and all we heard was like somebody say, who is that? Who's that? Yeah. And she goes, why would you say that? And I was like, why would you say that? And she goes, I didn't say anything, Kristin. I was like, I'm back to my room, my safe space. And at this point, Ryan and Kim had been like, you need to just tell it not to come in your room. Obviously he's listening to you. And I was like, yeah, guys, nothing messing with me. I was like, I don't think it wants anything to do with me. And we had made jokes because when we were doing the voice recording with Ryan and Kim there, I'd been like, do you watch, they'd had us all ask, are you in our room when we're sleeping? And on mine, it goes, no.
Like, clearly
so
just no.
They were like, yeah. I was like, okay, well, clearly my room is off limits. Haha.
I'm both relieved and a little insulted.
Yeah, I was like, I'm not trying to say anything, but clearly it's listening to me. Yeah, so then I was letting my dog out in the middle of the night, and all I remember was, like, I'm gonna cry. All I remember was opening the door, letting him out, turning around, and there was a woman. Now, we had started packing at this point, and there was a box of Stacie's stuff on the couch. And the woman had her hand in the box of Stacie's stuff. She had blonde hair, black eyes. She was lankier than she should have been. She was smiling, and she had like blood matted to the side of her head. And she just stared at me and was smiling with her hand in Stacie's moving boxes.
Did your dog sleep in your room?
Yeah, my dog slept in my room.
I'm willing to believe that's why the spirits don't go into your room.
Yeah, I screamed and I was on the floor, and that's where Lindsay found me.
I because this was late at night. This was probably maybe closer to 2 o'clock. So it was between 1 and 2 a.m. So I was dead asleep because at this point I had all morning classes, and I very much prioritized my sleep. So I went to bed like an old lady. I was like, I got to get up in the morning. No one disturb my sleep. And so I get woken up by this so guttural scream. I pop up. I ran out of my bedroom because I truly think that one of them is getting murdered. That's the type of scream that I'm talking about. And I come into the living room. I look toward the front of the house. I don't see anyone. I look to the back of the house, and there's Kristin, and she has shoved herself in the corner. Her hand is on the door. And I'm like, what's happening? What's going on? I don't understand what's happening. What? And Kristin is in such a panic, and she's just like, there's a woman on the couch. And I'm like looking at the couch. I'm like, there's no one on the couch. What woman? Who's this bitch? Like, what are we talking about? And Kristin's like, there was a woman sitting on the couch. She was just smiling at me. And I was like, okay, I need you to get out of the corner though, because you can hear Riley scratching at the back door. I'm like, I think Riley's done peeing. So we're going to have to let him in. So let's just take a step forward. Let's kind of get our bearings together, and we'll breathe through this. And Stacie, I don't know when exactly she showed up, but she showed up. She made sure that Kristin was okay. And she was like, okay, you're fine. And then leaves.
Yeah, I couldn't do it.
No.
I just walk away.
Stacie calls her
like,
mom.
she's fine.
I'm coasting Kristin out of the corner. I'm like, okay.
When I heard her scream, I was like, I don't know. That's something I've never heard before. And that scared me. So I just kind of retreated.
Fair enough.
Yeah. There's a definitive sound that is not a conscious sound. You know, it's like the human animal has a set of sounds that it can make in the most primal of emotional states. And when you hear it, it is so haunting. I'll
never forget it.
Yeah, you can't describe. It doesn't. You know, there's no words that really describe it well.
And you won't hear this on a television show. You won't hear this on a movie set or anything like that.
You can't replicate it.
No, can't.
You couldn't. Yeah.
And so I got Kristin to describe the woman to me. I was like, this is sounding like the same woman that was in my bathroom. Truly. But the woman I saw didn't have the mat.
Yeah.
She did have the
black hair. Yeah.
She had black hair, but the features on her face sounded the same. So I was like, I think this entity is taking different forms.
Sure. Or refining its form.
Yeah. And so we got everything to calm down that night. But again, like Kristin's saying, even that night, there was movement within the house. And at this point, I was hearing the movement. I'm like, oh, this is what they're talking about. And it was never ending. It just didn't stop. And then 2 nights later, well, I take that back. The night before, I can truly say, and maybe you guys can back me up on this, was there any sound in the house? Because I don't remember any sound prior to that night.
I was just anticipating like hearing her scream again, to be honest.
But you didn't hear like the movement or like the house was quiet.
Interesting.
Yeah. So the following night, again, in the witching hour between 2 and 3 a.m., Stacie and I both get waken up by the same guttural scream. And at this point, I had so much adrenaline pumping through and like you could feel the tension rising in the house. I mean, truly just building and building and building. And I remember sitting at the edge of my bed. And I was like, I don't want to see anything, because if I see something, it will break me. And I don't want this thing to break me. And that was the one thing I was like, I can handle a lot of things. I don't want this to think that it's more powerful than me, because it's not. But I was like, I don't want to also abandon my friend who's clearly, going through something right now. And I don't know what that something is. And I don't want to abandon my friend. So I find my courage. I get up, and my courage is me creaking open the door and calling out for Kristin. Like, Kristin.
And I woke up to seeing a woman standing at the base of my bed. And but it was more like how Lindsay had talked about her. She had the long black hair. She was just standing there staring at me at the base of my bed. And she still had the same black eyes, but she wasn't smiling. Yeah. She was, but that's almost the only thing I remember
and just flipping out and screaming because I remember seeing her there, and then touching my dog, and my dog was limp.
Oh.
And I thought he was dead, and that was all I remember from that night. So until we left the house.
Once I opened the door and I called out Kristin's name, she called out to mine, but she kept saying my name like on a loop. Mm-hmm. Like, I think at that point shock has taken over and she is no longer aware of what's happening. And at this point I was like, okay, so I go up to her door. I have my hand on the door and I'm trying to, I go to open the door and I can't open the door. Like at all. And Stacie is behind me and she is like, open the door. I'm like, I'm trying to, and I'm putting my whole weight. I'm literally slamming my body into the door to try and open it. And the door is not budging. And it starts to budge a little bit at a time, to the point where Stacie actually gets a clear view of Kristin before I do. Mm-hmm. And Stacie's like, holy shit, Kristin. Lindsay, look at Kristin. And I peek around the door and Kristin is covered in blood.
Oh my God.
It's covered in it. And I was like, holy shit. And I'm looking down, and then I finally popped the lights on, and her room is completely more destroyed than Stacie's and I's put together. And all the things was like barricaded in front of the door because it knew that someone was going to come. And I knew that for certain. So finally, I get the door open enough for Stacie, who's a smaller person because I'm standing at 5'10". There's more of me to try to get into. Stacie gets into the room. I get into the room and we find that Kristin is covered not only in blood, but also glass. Mm. Oh. And Stacie starts to pick the glass off of Kristin, and I'm looking around trying to figure out where the glass came from. She has this big vanity mirror. The mirror is all intact. The Cintiq is intact. And then I look behind me, and on the wall is the exact same mirror that at the beginning was on the ceiling fan.
Right.
It's been smashed to pieces, and now on the other side of the room on top of Kristin. All the glass.
The mirror was still hanging though, but
yeah.
But there was an explosion outward from inside the mirror.
Yes.
Right.
Kind of.
Well.
Yeah, it was weird.
Unfortunately, there are stories that mirror that entities escaping mirrors is a truly disturbing thing. Like of the many things that you could kind of like go through, having a mirror entity enter the world is dangerous. It's terribly dangerous. Mm-hmm. Oof. Bleh.
Yeah. So I tell Kristin, I was like, I need you to get your parents on the phone, because we got to go. There's no ifs and no buts at this point. We need to leave now because now it's getting so dangerous. Kristin she's now in such a state that she's just wandering, and Stacie's behind her with some gauze.
Trying to patch her up. Oh, no. She's just wandering around the house.
My dog was like,
he was out of it.
Like he was drugged.
Yeah.
But then he would, maybe when we started walking around, he kind of just like was okay. Mm-hmm. And then was fine. But at the time, like his body, that was the first thing I went and I grabbed him, and he was like limp in my arms. I thought he was dead.
Well, a lot of people believe that our pets have protective aspects to them, that there's basically kind of a bubble around your pet that kind of protects you. In order for an entity to engage with you, they have to basically shrink that bubble down. And a common way to do that is to kill the animal, or at the very least incapacitate it somehow. So, you know, when you said that it wasn't moving, I was like, oh, you're about to see what's after you. You know, you're about to find out. Because that was the other thing when Riley was outside and you saw the woman and she was smiling, it's like, oh, you might have been too far away from your protector. And now you're vulnerable to it. The other thing that I find very interesting is you say the woman was digging through Stacie's box.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then Stacie saw the woman at your home away from this place?
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't see her until after we had went back home, and I had actually seen Well, I'd actually went to bed in my bed the first night I got home, and my moving boxes were still in the bedroom. And I saw something like shadowy, like crouched down behind the moving box. And then I freaked out. I slept in the same bed as my mom for like 3 months with the light on in the bathroom so I could see where I was going. And that wasn't the woman, I don't think. But then like a month later, I saw her standing in my doorway outside my room when I finally moved back into my own room. And I had never seen her before or anything, and I still didn't see her face because she was like so tall. Her head was like against the ceiling. I only saw from like her neck like down. She was just so lanky and tall. And then I went back to sleeping in the same bedroom as somebody else for like a couple of weeks.
Yeah, sure. No, that makes perfect
like,
sense.
I'm not being alone at all right now.
Oh, yeah, that's something so like it just makes all the wheels in my brain turn. It's like,
right.
What are the connectivenesses? What was happening? Did she find a totem somewhere in your belongings to hide in? What all of these things kind of come to mind. But this story is so phenomenal. It is so harrowing what you went through. But
I mean, even like, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, no.
But
Please.
even like when we left that night, and that was like, we left the house, but that wasn't the end of it. We left the house, and as we're getting to the car, Lindsay hands me the phone. She goes, "Figure something out with your parents." And I just started sobbing, and then she goes, "Give me the phone." And we leave, we get in the car, and we turn back towards the house, and Stacie goes, "Kristin, did you see that?" And Lindsay goes, "Get in guard, don't look at it," because we see the blinds in Stacey's room open up,
like someone's peeking at you.
and we see the light go off, and then the blind shut. No. And she goes,
"We know that they were
in the car,
we're
going."
Until this point, I hadn't seen anything really either, and that was like the first time I was like, okay. And then I started crying. Kristin was crying, and Lindsay's just like, "Get in the car. We have to go now."
Because everyone's
trying to rally us. Yeah.
Oh my God. That's so harrowing. It's so terrifying.
Yeah.
What we didn't realize is that we get to the hotel. Now, we all have animals. So Kristin has Riley. Stacie has a pug named Castiel, and I had a cat named Cornelius. So we all have all three of us have our animals. We're at the motel. You probably know it's the Thunderbird.
Oh yeah, of course. Moon pies.
Yeah,
that's where we stayed. we snuck in a lot of the animals. They didn't know. But
one animal per room, but
well, if you're going to sneak anything into the Thunderbird, I think pets are the lowest on the
right.
rung.
Exactly. So we're all laying there, and I call my mom, and I can feel my voice cracking, and I was just like, nope, I'm not going to cry over this. I'm not going to do it. So I hang up with my mom, and I go lay down, and I'm in bed with Kristin, and Stacie has this pull-out cot. And I'm going through my phone, and Stacey's also going through her phone, and I realized that I said, "Why did you call me, Kristin?" And she was like, "What are you talking about?" And I'm like, "You called me probably maybe 20 minutes prior to this situation happening." And Stacey's like, "Yeah, me too. Actually, at this time." And I said, "No, because mine said it's at this time as well. And I have a voicemail from you." And Stacey's like, "Me too." And Kristin's like, "I didn't call you guys. I was asleep." And then we play the voicemail, and there's nothing on the voicemail, nothing that the human ear could pick up. And then we did a little experiment, because at the time, Stacie and I were both with Verizon. So I was like, "Stacie, why don't you call my phone and just don't say anything when it gets to the voicemail part of it?" And so she calls my phone and gets to the voicemail part. She doesn't say anything. And Verizon actually comes back and says, "You need to talk in order to leave a voicemail. Because if not, we're going to hang up." So there is something on our phones from Kristin's phone on those voicemails. And what doesn't make sense is the fact that it's at the exact same time, even though I have like a 45-second voicemail and Stacie has like a minute and a half. So at one point, the time should have changed.
Right.
And it didn't.
We always think about that. Oh, because they deleted them, and there was no call log on my phone. And then we called AT&T, which is mine, and there was no call log.
Wow.
Yeah. So
amazing. That's incredible.
And
Horrifying.
It's such an incredible story. It really is. And that was, and so that was the departure.
We went back.
Oh no!
Yeah, this is not the end.
No,
It's close.
I was like, oh, phew, they're safe. Everything's good. Yay! Hug the dogs.
We had like 3 weeks of school left.
Oh.
No.
So we ended up going back, but we moved our beds like crazy people into the living room.
Yes.
Yep.
And we put a ring of salt around it and put tape over it. And we hung crosses on the wall, and we weren't allowed to be in the house alone. And we had rules. Nobody was allowed to be out of the house past 7. Like we weren't, and that was that. And you had to be in that like group area by 7. And we would still hear stuff, but nothing was messing with us. But we would hear stuff all night. We'd still hear the talking. We'd hear talking right outside of the space.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. We had a wall of boxes because, the kitchen, like Lindsay had said earlier, opened up into the living room. But we had a wall of boxes there. So we'd be, getting food from the kitchen. We'd hear people talking on the other side of the wall of boxes. And just being like, do you see them? Do you see them? Do you see them? And then, so we lived like that.
Well, no, that's super smart, because the divide and conquer of that kind of situation to band together, to have a central location where all of you are together. So you don't have those individual, like you're being picked off individually. So that was very smart.
Yeah, we really, honestly, we didn't know what else to do. Ryan and Kim had said they were going to try and contact a couple of religious organizations to see if anybody would come help us. We had called several different, churches of different kinds, literally anything, to see if anybody would come out. And, I know my parents had also looked into seeing who they could contact. We had called a couple places, and oddly enough, the last minute, I'm trying to think of the name of the church, but the giant church, the
St.
giant
John the
Catholic
Baptist.
Church, giant Catholic church in Savannah, the castle,
the diocese of the Catholic Church here in the southeastern region.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
But Ryan had gotten in touch with a pastor there. I believe it was Pastor Dan, right?
Yes.
Daniel. Yeah.
Okay.
Father Daniel.
Yeah.
And he had said he would be able to come help us, but he was leaving that day, or he would talk to us, and we went to the back of the church. Now, it was wild. It was like a horror movie. We started walking up to this church, and it started downpouring, and the lightning was going wild, and I've never seen something like that hit out of nowhere. And we're in there, and we're in his, library office talking to him about, everything that had happened. And he's asking us all these questions, and he's telling us, like Egyptian gods, or, could be demons and things like that. And all of a sudden lightning is striking outside and lighting up the whole room, and the power's flickering. And we're like, this is terrifying.
Right.
Like the Exorcism.
But absolutely appropriate for what you're doing,
Yeah, it was really insane. And he goes, I'm going to come right back to your house with you. He goes, I have to leave in like an hour, but I'm supposed to be out of town. He goes, but I'm going to come now. I'm just going to come in the van. I'll follow you guys. We'll go now. And he did like an exorcism on the house.
Absolutely.
And he helped us, and we were actually able to kind of have a normal life for the last week we were there.
Oh, that's fantastic. Although that's cutting it such to the wire. It's,
right.
You have to go through so much to get relief right at the end, but I'm so happy that you found relief, because it's such a harrowing experience. And oftentimes, certainly like in the first And I guess we were talking about that before. Like, it's very possible that whatever he had done might have only lasted like a couple of weeks, but luckily you would be gone in that time, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We had like a couple things happen right before we left, but that was essentially the end of everything. And I will say, I know we had some minor stuff happen because we started talking about everything for the show, which is why.
Oh yes, that'll do it.
Yeah, even when you guys had originally reached out, we were like, yeah, we don't know, because when we started talking about it for the TV show, we had to go over it with this person. We had to go over it with this person. We were constantly telling the story over and over again. And I know Stacie had a nightmare of the woman at her window. And I had woken up and I said, Stacie, and I had never been to Stacie's house before. And I was able to describe what Stacie was wearing. And I said, I was at her window in my dream. And I was scratching at her window. And I remember her being like, the woman was scratching at my window. And I was able to tell Stacie like what she was wearing and what her room looked like without. And that was like, we were like, we need to stop talking about this. Because
and it's true,
that
is, it's such the burden of these experiences is they live on in the telling. They live on in the memory and in the emotional content of it. And you can summon it all back up if you're not careful about how you present it and how you're investing in having the story told. But it really is an important story to tell. I think that there are people who are going through similar things all around the world, and they spend their time fearing that they've lost their mind or that there's nothing that can be done or no one else would understand. And so, that's kind of why we love doing this podcast, is to give people a little peace of mind who are in similar situations or who've had similar situations. So it's like, you're not crazy. You're not alone. These things do happen, and they don't happen because you pulled out the Ouija board or you listened to the wrong rock song or, it's there is no prescription for how these events start. And there is very rarely an answer to what's happening. And that's, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story, because it's an amazing story, by the way. And if you get a few years behind you, you should all get together and write a book.
I completely agree.
Because it's a well-rounded story on top of everything else. On top of everything else, you hit all these things, because we never got to the fourth stage of demonic possession, which is the possession. But it sounds like you were right on the verge of it. The night of the mirror explosion is exactly what you expect at the onset of a possession. Because a lot of people don't understand that possession is not the demon is inside you and taking over. It's that it's worn you down so much that your resolve to fight it has gotten to a place where it can take advantage of you and can make you do things and can take over for these small pockets of time. It's not, oh, well, now there's a demon in you. No, it's that all those influences from infestation to obsession to oppression have made you so exhausted that you can do things and not remember them. You can make a phone call and not remember making it. You could, call out at night and speak, in languages you don't speak, and all those things that you constantly hear in these stories, because people are thinking, oh, well, now that person's a demon. It's like, no, that's not what's happening. That's the possession it's taking control of somebody that they have spent a long time weakening through hauntings and through events and through making things just kind of, So yeah, I'm wowed by the story. It's an incredible story, and I wouldn't say dive into it right now.
Yeah,
give yourself a break from it. But at some point, you should seek out or find somebody to write for you, and set it down in your words and your terms, because no one has your story. No one knows your story better than you, and have to constantly get it filtered through other people is always going to make it. Altered, right? People always want the story to fit their narrative, but it is definitely your narrative, and it's an incredible story, by the way.
Well, thank you. I know that we talk about this all the time when we meet other people who've had supernatural situations, and they're like, something got moved. I'm like, I got a story for you.
Exactly.
I think I'll win this one.
Yeah, you were absolutely. These are such heightened events that people have. Like, I once saw a car move 3 inches on a tabletop, and that's like the most harrowing thing that they've ever experienced, and it altered their perception of reality. You have a story that is definitely defying what people expect of the world. So it is it's an important story, and you should safeguard it and put it in your terms as as your story. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, that was the one thing that we really wanted to come on to hear and make sure that our story got told and not through anybody else, because we know that when we walked away from the television show after it got aired, we're like, oh, what?
Right.
Like, this was not.
It was wild.
Yeah.
And we appreciate y'all letting us be that platform, because honestly, it is a wild story, and I'm sure it has affected all of you greatly. So we appreciate that we were allowed to hear it. But
yeah, absolutely.
We would love to have y'all back for a part 2, just because I know we have a lot of questions. I see people in the comments with questions, but we do have to wrap up because there's about to be a very loud metal concert happening right next door to us. So, but yeah, we'd love to have y'all back on so that we can do a little bit of a kind of a Q&A type episode.
Sure.
And,
yeah, absolutely. There's so many things just like, I know we didn't touch on it, but I'd love to do a kind of a deep dive on different aspects that we never got to like explore.
Exactly.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank y'all so much again. And thank y'all to everybody listening to this episode. We would love for you to leave some love down in the comments for Kristin, Stacie, and Lindsay, and thanking them for sharing their story with us. If y'all enjoyed today's episode, please make sure you stick around with us. And if you like extra content, you can find us over on Patreon. We do all of these live streams, currently live streaming. We live stream multiple times a week usually. And so it's a lot of fun over there, a lot of Discord on the Patreon side of things. But thank y'all again. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day whenever you're listening to this. And my name is Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Soucy.
And stay spooky, y'all.